In today's lesson, we are going to be learning about two-point visual perspective. In two-point visual perspective, we are going to be attempting to draw three-dimensional objects on 2D paper, just like we did with one-point perspective. In one-point perspective, we're dealing with objects which the front of the object is directly facing us straight on, and it only recedes back into the paper to a single vanishing point. In two-point perspective, we'll be working with objects that are turned askew, so they could be so that the sides of the objects are both receding to two separate vanishing points. You'll see what I mean more when I begin my drawing. Now, to do this drawing, I'm going to be using two pencils. I have three here, but I'll be using my thin pencil first to draw all my construction lines. These are very light lines, and then I'll be tracing them with the thicker pencil, the visible object lines, to show the visible edges of the cuboid shapes that I'm making. To start my drawing, the first thing I want to do is make my horizon line. To do that, I'm going to make two dots measuring up from the bottom. We always want to use 2 points of reference whenever we try to make a perfectly horizontal line, and our horizon line is perfectly horizontal, even in two-point perspective. In one-point perspective, we had a single vanishing point in the center of our paper, but that's not the same with two-point perspective. Well, let me show you what I mean here. So in one-point perspective, we have objects that come directly at us dead on. They face us straight on from the back of the paper, so point in the paper, so they're coming towards us almost. So our horizontal lines are all perfectly horizontal, our vertical lines are all perfectly vertical, and every other line is a perspective line headed towards the vanishing point. So our X, Y, Z axis looks like this: perfectly horizontal, perfectly vertical, and then lines receding towards the vanishing point. In two-point perspective, we have two vanishing points. So our y-axis is still perfectly vertical, but our x-axis and our z-axis are off to the side here, and objects are turned askew. They're turned a little bit. So instead of facing us dead on, now they're turned so the back of them is further away than the front of that object. So in our z direction, objects will recede towards one vanishing point, and in our x direction, objects recede toward the other vanishing point. This creates a two-point perspective for any object that's not perfectly facing straight towards you, and that's the two-point perspective look here. So again, y-axis is still perfectly vertical, but all other lines recede either towards the z or x axis. And where those points are put on your horizon is dependent on how radical you want your visual distortion to be. So if I wanted to put a point on my drawing here on the outside of the drawing plane, I could do that. That would make it so it wasn't quite as drastic of a turn, so it wouldn't be turned quite so far away. But I'm going to put them just here on the farthest edges of my drawing plane. Again, if I wanted to make more drastic angles, like it was turning further away, like the objects were turning further away from me in either direction, I could move those points either in or out to create that illusion. So I'm going to measure from the border line of my paper, the left border line, the same distance, and make two dots. This will allow me to make a perfectly vertical line for the front corner of my cuboid shape. So again, make two dots, and then anywhere along that perfectly vertical line, I can make a line segment here for the front corner of my cube. Now, if I was using a set square, I could just align the bottom of my set square or the top of my set square to the border lines and make perfectly vertical lines that way, but if all I have is a ruler, I need to make 2 points. Okay, then from the top and the bottom of that perfectly vertical line segment I made, I'm going to draw perspective lines extending towards both the X and Z vanishing points. And this gives me the visual distortion as if both of these sides are receding away from me into the distance. So I'm going to make 2 dots to make the left corner, or the left side of, or the left edge of my cuboid shape. And I'm going to measure the same distance on the right side and make 2 dots. It doesn't have to be within those 2 areas, it just anywhere there, and then I can draw my line segment connecting the perspective lines with another line segment there. Again, perfectly vertical. Now from the bottom of those lines, I'm going to draw perspective lines back to the opposite vanishing points. And that will create the intersection for the back of my cube. I'll do the same thing to make the top of my cube here. Draw lines to the opposite vanishing points. And that is my completed cube form. Now I can go ahead and outline the visible edges of my cube with a darker pencil, showing the visible object lines. One thing I did forget to draw was the back corner, and the back corner should be a perfectly vertical line where the 2 lines intersect in the back. Let me get my other pencil and draw that in real quick. It should be perfectly vertical if you did it correctly. You may find that it's a little bit off on your drawings. I have a few of mine that are a little bit off as well. Just do your best to put it in the right spot. It should be a perfect vertical line showing the back corner there. And then we can draw the back edges. Because this is above the horizon line, I can of course see the bottom of my cube, or my cuboid shape. If it was below the horizon line, I could see the top. If it was on the horizon line, I could see neither the top nor bottom. There you have it, one cuboid shape done with a ruler. I'm going to do another one now with my set square, and I'll probably use the set square for the rest of the drawing. It is just a little bit more convenient for me to use. Again, it's a nice tool to have if you have one. It makes it I think it's a little more accurate and a little bit quicker than making 2 points of measurement for each vertical line. So again, 1 vertical line, and then lines to each vanishing point from the top and bottom of that line. It's a little too far for my square, so I'll bring my ruler back out. There we go. And again, we're making these lines very light, very thin. We have a sharp, light pencil. And then again, line up with the bottom border line to make another perfectly vertical line. Turn it this way. Here we go. Another perfectly vertical line. And then from those corners, I will draw lines to the opposite vanishing point to create the back edges of my cube. And then if I did it correctly, where those lines intersect should be another perfectly vertical line for the very back corner, or very back edge. And then I'll just, again, outline the visible lines with a dark pencil. It's important to be very careful to make sure that your lines are accurate and straight. That's why we make light construction lines, because a light line is a smaller line with a sharp pencil. It makes a more accurate point. It's a little bit easy to be sloppy with a fatter line, a thicker line. So there we have our second cuboid shape above the horizon. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and make 8 more to complete my drawing. Now, I want to take a moment and talk about neatness with our drawings. In order to make a drawing that looks nice, we need to be precise. We need to be exact with our lines. This drawing took me about 2 hours to complete in total. So I draw pretty quickly, and I've done a few of these. So I'm probably going to be able to draw even a little faster than most of you guys will. That being said, 2 hours is a considerable amount of time to draw, 10 cubes. The reason it takes so long is because I'm taking extra amount of care with every line that I draw to make sure they are as precise and accurate as possible. With your drawings, you too should be doing your best to make sure that your vertical lines are perfectly as vertical as you can make them, and that the lines that go towards the vanishing points go towards the exact same small point, that they're not going towards, close to the vanishing point, but not quite to the vanishing point. They should all go exactly to the exact same point, the center of the vanishing point. In fact, you may find that it's easier if you make a really small vanishing point, or some people do small X's and have the line go directly to the center of that X. The more accurate you can be, the more impressive your drawing is going to look. Another thing too, um, keeping your drawing free from smudges and eraser marks and things like that. The way I do that is I use a very, like I said, a very light pencil for all of my uh, perspective lines, a very sharp, light pencil. And then I switch to a different pencil, a darker, thicker pencil for my dark lines. Different line weights also make your drawing look more interesting. So using those different line weights effectively add another level of interest to your drawing. Now, you may not have two pencils to switch back and forth between. A lot of times with my drawings, I'll do all my light lines first, and then at the end, I'll go back and outline with the darker line. This sometimes is actually even easier, allows you to be even neater. You don't need mechanical pencils either. You can do this with, a lot of times I draw with wood-cased pencils. Again, just make sure that you have a sharp pencil when you're doing your construction lines and use very light pressure. And then if your pencil's a little bit duller, when you go to do your heavy outlines, you push a little harder, that'll be just fine. Again, the most important thing to have a good drawing is to make sure your vertical lines are perfectly vertical. And if you don't have a set square, I know it can be tedious making 2 points of measurements for each line. Obviously, if you're working at home, you don't have a set square. If you have two vertical lines that are close to each other, you can reference those and use your eye and get it pretty close most of the time. If you're making a line that's not close to another vertical line that you can reference, that you're not sure is perfectly vertical, it's always good to double check by making those two dots, 2 points of reference to make another perfect vertical line to reference. Just be careful and try to be as perfectly accurate as possible. Obviously, if you're in class, you can use the set square. You should be lining up the edge of your set square for every vertical line. When you start getting to the end of your drawing, you should be pretty cramped looking for where can I squeeze my last 2 or 3 boxes, my last 2 or 3 cuboids. If you're not, it means you probably drew your cubes a little too small. It's not very interesting to have a drawing with 10 small little cuboids. Making them large and more prominent will be a much more interesting drawing. So think about your composition, make them good sized, and when you get to the end, you should be squeezing the last few in there as best you can. This will make a more interesting drawing, and when you're finished with the last one, erase any stray marks, and you should have a pretty nice finished drawing.